All right, the recording started. And just thank everybody for their time, especially our presenters today, Darren and Bill. I know you guys have very busy schedules, so thank you for taking the time and helping us with this Learn Academy that we've got started. For those in attendance today, you're in for a treat. I'm super excited to have these guys on board. 81st and 82nd presidents of GCSAA, let alone their career experience. Darren's coming to us from Naples, Florida at Old Florida Golf Club. Bill from St. Louis at MTI Distribution. And they're going to talk today about building a successful career in the green industry, and give their insight and provide some opportunities for y'all in the crowd to ask some questions. This session is recorded, so it will be available on our websites as well as being emailed out through our constant contacts to be able to view this after the fact and share with your teams back there at the golf courses or facilities that you're managing. So on behalf of W.S. Conley, we manage 3 companies here in the East Coast: Landscape Supply, 10 Barge, and Walker Supply. And we're excited to have y'all on today and provide some education with this Leadership Education and Resources Network that we've started as a service to our customers and to the industry. Again, welcome Darren, welcome Bill. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I'll let you guys talk about your careers. I don't think you need much of an introduction. You guys are on the biggest of stages when you were presidents of national GCSAA, and you certainly have major impact on this industry. So thank you. The stage is yours, and I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Eric. It's truly an honor for me to be with you today. I am humbled each and every time I'm asked to speak to my peers. So I appreciate the invitation. I thank you for attending and those that might watch at a later date. The title of our presentation is Building a Successful Career in the Green Industry. First, I'd like to say that there is not one path, and every path may not be as linear as others. So what I thought I would do is tell you a little bit about how I found this industry, an early lesson from a very wise man, and some lessons I've learned along the way. And again, thank you for the sponsors that made this possible. So this is my career path. I've been the superintendent at Old Florida Golf Club since 1992, so 30 years after serving as an assistant superintendent at the Loxahatchee Club, 2 stints at a little course in Georgia called Augusta National. And then I first strapped my boots on at Golden Eagle Country Club in Tallahassee, Florida. So, they say time flies when you're having fun. Well, it does. And been in the industry for over 30 years. And I put this slide up here, not to say I've reached any kind of a pinnacle, but I certainly was blessed, and I feel fortunate to have been elected the president of GCSA in 2018. I was the 82nd president, following Mr. Bill Maynard, who was our 81st. I use the slide because it's special to me to think back about when I stumbled on this career in 1988 as a very young man that did not know what he wanted to do. And I can assure you that serving as president of the National Association was the furthest thing from my mind. But in '88, I was fortunate to find Golden Eagle Country Club, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I did that. When I was in high school in Tallahassee, Florida, my thing was basketball. If you could major in a subject in high school, it would have been basketball for me. In fact, I was the captain of my varsity team. So my high school years were filled with basketball, a few classes scattered in, and not much else. So when I finished, I was at a loss at what to do. I didn't know. My parents were both very engaged parents. My mother was an educator. My father was a state employee. My father was the first person in his family to ever go to college, so his boy was going to go to college. So I was like many challenged in high school graduates at that point. Once basketball ended, I didn't know what I was going to do, but Dad made sure I went to community college because I didn't have a major picked out. So 2 years later, I finished community college and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought about what I enjoyed, and what I enjoyed is being outside. I enjoyed being in the natural environment, working with my hands, things that a lot of golf course superintendents enjoy. So I thought, what do I do? I didn't know about golf course management. So I started at FSU as a civil engineer. And for an individual who never studied, I hate to admit it, but never studied a day in his life in high school or community college, was blessed to make A's and B's. I started FSU in civil engineering, and I know the professors were speaking English because I understood the words, but the words weren't making sense together. So I was completely lost. And I remember going to my father and just trying to save him some tuition money and say, Dad, I'm going to drop out of college and just to help save you some money before the time passes. And I remember feeling like a failure. I remember crying. It was just a tough time in my life. I was lost. So as fate would have it, my last day at campus, I'd gone back to drop out. I ran into a high school classmate who I had not seen in 2 or 3 years because we didn't go to community college together. He had been at FSU. So he asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm started civil engineering, but I'm gonna drop out, and explained why and explained to him about my passions. And he says, you need to get a job at the local golf course. He said, I just finished a summer job between semesters at FSU. He goes, but I loved it. And my boss at Golden Eagle, he went to a school in Penn State, Pennsylvania, that teaches you how to build golf courses. I thought, great, build golf courses. Kind of similar to civil engineering, so I'll give it a go. So back then, I cut off my shoulder length hair. I admit it. Took out 2 earrings, and it's plural, and I applied at Golden Eagle Country Club. I didn't even know what a golf course superintendent did, but the golf course superintendent, Jeff Vietmeyer, at the time, gave this young 20-year-old a shot, and he hired him with no experience. So I can remember that day like it was yesterday, that passion that I had finally found. I mean, strapping the boots on in the morning, watching the sunrise, just all the joys of being on a golf course, the birds, the wildlife. So I immersed myself in the industry, joined GCSAA, got the magazine back when it was a couple hundred pages thick. I read it cover to cover every time. I bought turf books, tree books, twigger books, anything just to learn. And just so I totally immersed myself in the industry and loved it. So I finally found my passion. Well, it turns out that school in Pennsylvania was Penn State, and it wasn't a school that taught you how to build golf courses. It was golf course management. So you can imagine that my excitement of being accepted my first year, back in the late 80s, the demand to get into turf school was extremely high. But Dr. Duich had a passion to bring in students from all over the world. So he loves students from different states. I was fortunate to work for a Penn State grad in Tallahassee, Florida, where we were growing Penncross bentgrass, one of Dr. Duich's varieties. And his predecessor, Dave Gardner, up in Atlanta, had also graduated Penn State. So I had a couple good letters, growing bentgrass in Florida. So stars aligned, and I got into Penn State and under Dr. Duich. So my excitement going into State College, was, you can imagine, is extremely high. I was going to learn all the turf grass knowledge I needed to be a golf course superintendent. Turf grass was the way to go. It's my passion. So just like that first day at Golden Eagle, I can remember my first day sitting in the classroom at Penn State like it's yesterday. It's immersed in my memory. So here's 20 plus students from all over the country, a few international students. We'd all just come together the day prior, 2 days prior. It's a beautiful fall day in State College, Pennsylvania. The windows are open. And back then it was old crank style windows. Brick buildings, literally wooden desk like this. This really was what we were sitting in, and they were all anxious. So finally, Dr. Duich arrives, walks through the door, satchel of books in his hand, goes to the podium, sets his books down. It was a little odd. We're looking around at each other going, okay, this is interesting. He hadn't turned around to even look at us as students. He just went straight to the podium, put his books down, grabbed a piece of chalk. I don't know the age of people on this call, but chalk is what you used to use on a blackboard, and you had dusty erasers that you used. So it's what he was writing on. So he took a piece of chalk and he drew a circle. And all this seems like it took 20 minutes. Back then you could smoke in a classroom. So he's in between drawing a circle. He takes a toke of a cigarette, and blows out of his ears. Wonderful guy. But so he finally takes that bottom, that triangle, and he colors it in and shades it in. And then takes another toke of a cigarette and he writes the word turf on the bottom of that triangle. And we're all just, jaws are dropping, big glassy eyes, what's going on? And he writes the word people in the bigger part of that circle. So it looks like a pie. So we nicknamed it the Dewich pie. And so he finally turned around to look at the classroom and he said, so you've all come here to learn how to be a golf course superintendent, to learn golf course management, turf grass, be the best you can be in the business. Well, what we can teach you in the next 2 years is 10% of what you need to be a successful golf course superintendent. That turf grass is 10% of your job. 90% of your job is people. And so again, you can imagine this 20-year-old kid hearing this for the first time, thinking I'm learning turf grass, and he's telling me it's 10% of my job. And he continued his conversation, his presentation, by saying, you'll all call me in 5 years and tell me how right I was. It's like one of those moments where you drop a mic, it just, you're going, what just happened? And I remember, thinking, the rest of the class is a blur, by the way, but I remember thinking, oh boy, I'm going to have to go back to my father and tell him I failed again. Oh boy, this isn't what I need to do in life. So what am I going to do? So as I said, the rest of it was a blur, but fortunately, I did not have to go back to my father. For the next 2 years, we studied all the things we needed to be agronomically sound, all the turf grass classes. For the next 2 years, we were taught by the various professors, Dr. Waddington, Dr. Watsky, Dr. Dewich, just some world-class people. This literally is the first page of notes I ever took at Penn State. And you can see the Dewich pie there on the top. I have all my notebooks. So fortunately, I didn't have to go up with my dad. And 2 years later, I'm excited and have that turf grass knowledge. So what I thought I'd do now is just transition to some things I've learned since that first day at Penn State over the 30 years at Old Florida Golf Club. And as Dr. Dewich says, the day you stop learning is the day you die. So I do not consider this list to be any kind of a catch-all, or certainly not what everyone will need. But it's just things that I've learned that I think will make others successful. They certainly made me successful. And the first is be visible. Golf course superintendents are very comfortable behind the scenes. We're very comfortable in the valley or in our world. We often don't want to engage with members. It's not really in our personalities, in generalities. But there's many ways to be visible. Go to the putting green, go to the first tee, walk through the clubhouse in the morning when you have select groups that are going to be there. Again, many ways to be visible. Go for a walk on the golf course, checking the golf course. So be visible. Keep your name in front of members and employers. They need to know who you are. It's a lot harder to not like or to fire someone that you've become friends with, or they know you. So back when I first got in the business, putting your name in front of members and employers was an article in a monthly newsletter. We used to send those things out that were printed on paper and all the members got it. Well, today it's social media or being visible, but it's making sure that you get your name in front of the members. Let them know, I'm Darren J. Davis. I've been your golf course superintendent for 30 years. Make sure they know who you are. Seems basic, but we all have a boss. And you know what? That boss is always right. We all have actually more than one boss, because all the golfers at our facility are our boss. So since with that said, you give the golfers what they want. It's their golf course. It's not your golf course. So give them what they want. Most golfers can't break 100. So make the round enjoyable for them, the all of them, not just a select group of low handicappers. But give the golfers what they want, because golf can be challenging, but it should be enjoyable. So you have a role in that. And when you think about giving golfers what they want, I'm sure many of you listening to this now have heard the silliest comment or the silliest question, or that individual that asked that question or asked you to do something, At that time may not be an influential member, but you never know. That individual could be your next green chairman, could be your next club president. So that's what I mean about give them what they want, within reason, of course. And if you can't, don't just ignore the request. Explain why you can't do it. A few more things. Seek advice, and not just on Twitter. Seek advice elsewhere. Go out and visit your peers, visit their golf courses, have peers visit you, interact with them at chapter meetings, anywhere you have a chance to talk to individuals in the golf course management industry, the green industry, do so and seek advice. In 30 years in this business, I can't tell you how many times I've had a peer see something and I look at myself or a staff member and say, why didn't I think of that 5 years ago, 10 years ago? I mean, you seem silly, it was so basic. So seek advice, get out. I know that it sometimes feels awkward. You need to be seen at your golf course, but I can tell you it'll pay dividends. Next, experiment. Experiment in ways that golfers see you experiment. Make sure they know you're trying to make their golf experience more enjoyable. So do it in ways that is evident, whether you're experimenting with new turf grasses, new products, new ways of doing things. Make sure that they know that you're not becoming complacent in any way. Perception is reality. So by being seen and being visible about trying new things and experimenting, you're showing them that you're trying to help them have a better experience every time they play. Toot your own horn. I'm big on this. I can actually give a 90-minute presentation on just tooting your own horn. And it should not have a negative connotation when I say toot your own horns. What I mean is doing this in a very humble way, being confident, not cocky in any way, but making sure that people know the value you have and you present to the golf course and their enjoyment. You can always control detail, even when things are out of your control. You can't control the weather. You may be working all the hours possible, and there's things that you'll never be able to control, but you can always control detail. So in South Florida, when the sun is the lowest point in the sky, but yet it's our high point of season, and members are all here, when you can't control grass growth and it's not growing because of the cold temperatures, you can make sure the heads are edged. You can make sure the bunkers are edged. You can pick up every cigarette butt, which we do. That's part of our staff's protocol. You don't drive by a cigarette butt. You can always control detail. Learn and use people's names. I once read a survey by the National Restaurant Association that said, why do you come back to this restaurant? And the number one answer was a fond greeting. And I don't know how many people watching, I can't see the faces, but I don't know your age group, can remember the sitcom Cheers. If you remember Cheers, every time Norm walked into that bar, the Ted Danson's bar, Norm, everyone shouted his name. So he got that fond greeting. I think you can draw a similar correlation to the golf course industry. Why do people come to your golf course? Certainly it's conditioning, it's the experience they have, but part of that experience is in being appreciated and enjoyed. Obviously providing quality turf grass is the most important thing golf course superintendents do, essentially. But if you're not attracting clientele or keeping clientele, what does it really matter how good your golf course is? So engage with people, get to know them, their names, communicate with them. Why do they go to the golf pro? It bothers golf course superintendents a lot that, well, why are they going to the golf pro? Why are they telling him this? He's a good guy. I don't blame them, but why do they do that? Because they know him. They know him by name. So it's something that I believe as a golf course superintendent has helped me immensely, is learning their names, engaging in conversation. And then I was born in Alabama, so it's Mr. and Mrs. is easy for me, but it is Mr. and Mrs. at your golf course until you're told differently. And even when you're told differently, for me, at the golf course, it's still Mr. and Mrs. When any other members can see me interacting with any of them, it's Mr. and Mrs. So find balance, healthy mind, healthy body. I know, easier said than done. If you're familiar with personality testing, the Myers-Briggs test, I've done a lot of different personality tests. I'm an ISFJ. What that means is I won't go into all the details. What that means is my personality is such that I can also make myself almost unhealthy because I don't handle change well. I want to work extremely hard to provide something for someone else. So I've had to learn to make adjustments. I actually took a personality test for the TPC network back when I was at Augusta. I was interning at TPC at Prestantia to be an assistant. And the general manager says, you'll never make it in this business. You will not be able to roll with the changes of weather. You'll never make it. So I had to find that balance. And I found it in exercise, leaving at lunch many days of the week, getting on a bike, putting in a podcast, listening to it in my ears as I ride the bike. And it helps me maintain the engagement not only in the industry, but healthy mind, healthy body. Get involved. Can't stress this enough. As I said earlier, I was the 82nd president of GCSAA. I've also been the president of the FGCSA, the Everglades GCSA, and the Florida Turfgrass Associations. Served on many, many, many committees for GCSA. In fact, I still chair the Centennial Committee. We'll celebrate our 100th anniversary in 2026. So the involvement, the energy it takes, I can tell you has been all worth it. Sure, you take some shots sometimes, but the personal and professional growth has been immense. And the people that you'll get to interact with, the engagement, the things you'll learn by interacting with those individuals, and it doesn't hurt the resume. So if you're serving for the right reasons, it will pay dividends for you. So get involved if at all possible. You're more likely to lose a job due to communication skills than you are from dead grass. I've seen this over and over for 30 years. Some of the best grass growers in the world that are poor communicators have lost their jobs. Some average grass growers that are great communicators manage to keep their jobs, even when the grass isn't as good. So you can communicate out of many things. So, the more communication, the better. I always say that you can never over communicate, but you can certainly under communicate. Step out of your comfort zone. Again, as golf course superintendents, we love being outdoors. We love growing grass. We love providing a product to members. But step out of your comfort zone. If there's things that you can learn outside of turf grass industry, do so. Things that you need help on. Public speaking is not something that I enjoy. Certainly not something that I planned on doing. But if asked to speak, say yes. Just get out of that comfort zone. Now, leaders continually learn, and they do that by getting out of their comfort zone. Be humble and be a team player. Cannot stress this enough. And in football, you have a 2-minute warning. Well, this is our 5-minute warning. This video clip is 4 minutes. It means a lot to me. So I'm going to hit play. And at the end of this, we'll come back and we'll wrap it up, and I'll turn it over to my co-presenter, Bill Maynard.
In 2015 in training camp, we asked some of our veteran players, our best players, our leaders to make presentations to the team at our night meetings. And so Whit went first, and we talked about it. He said, hey, I want to talk about Y option. This is his play. Signature play. He's got over 1,100 catches. Probably half of them are on Y option. For those of you guys who were here, who were in the room, you remember what I'm talking about. It was simply the greatest presentation I've ever seen in football. He talked about his stance, where his weight is, where his hand is, how he releases versus defender, inside or outside, based on his alignment. He talked about the number of steps he takes, the guy's inside leverage or outside leverage, how he runs the routes. He talked about his eyes, his shoulders, his hips, his feet, the angle he's taking coming out, what he's doing with the ball after he catches it. It was just like nothing I'd ever seen. He finishes the presentation with a clip. It was a clip of one play from the previous season. Bravo. Over the middle, he's got Witten down inside the 25. We played Detroit in the playoff game at our stadium, and the situation was 4th and 6 with just over 6 minutes to go in the game. We were down by 3. We're on the plus 42-yard line. This is the play of the game. We called Y option. Detroit plays 2-man. 2-man means they're going to rush 4, have 2 deep safeties, and all the cover guys can play underneath their man because they've got help. If you look back on a Y option, it's probably not a great call versus 2-man. If you run Y option 100 times versus this look, 95 times, the option is to break out. So Witten, who knows this play better than anybody on the planet, gets up to the top of the route. He feels the defender sink underneath him and play to the outside. He puts his right foot in the ground, gives a little head nod, circles back inside. Romo moves, delivers a strike between the 8 and the 2. Witt turns up the field, 21-yard gain. 6 plays later, Romo to Terrence Williams for a touchdown, the game winner. So Witt takes the next couple minutes talking about what he saw and what he felt. It was great. But then he stops and he says, I'll tell you why this play really worked. And he said, I want you to look at Dez Bryant here. He's our ex-receiver. They play 2-man for one reason. Dez Bryant. You need a guy underneath, they need a guy on top. Dez Bryant's one of the best receivers in the National Football League. He deserves that attention. Then he talked about the offensive line, Tyron Smith and his set, and how he used his hands and where his eyes were, how he punched and scratched and clawed and fought. He talked about Ron Lear, our left guard, Travis Frederick, Zach Martin working inside, working together, passing things off, scratching, clawing, fight until the end of the down. Talked about Jeremy Parnell, our right tackle, his set, and how he was battling to somehow keep the rusher away from Romo. We talked about Cole Beasley and Terrence Williams taking outside releases, turning the defender's eyes away from him and running the safety off so he'd be isolated. We talked about DeMarco Murray, his protection assignment, running a swing, get that linebacker out of there so I can break inside. And he talked about Romo, the greatness of Romo, his toughness, mental toughness, physical toughness, his instincts, his awareness to kind of hang in there with him. It all came alive on 4th and 6. Romo slid, threw between the 8 and the 2, and he went. So it struck me that this play, his signature play, where he made it at the critical moment, he didn't make it about him. He did what he always does. He makes it about everybody else. He made it about the team.
I love that clip. Whether you're a football fan or not, it stresses that team mentality. Together, everyone achieves more. This quote does the same thing. And, you know, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help people get what they want. So that really brings me full circle back to where I talked about this very young 20-year-old kid 35 years ago, getting advice from Dr. Duich that it's 10% turf and 90% people. What's made me successful in the career is not turf grass. It's people, it's relationships. That certainly is what has made me successful. And I'll end with this, you know, being on the backside of a 30-year career, you know, the days are long, but the years are short. I have found immense joy and satisfaction in this industry. Sure, it can be challenging. Sure, we often have unrealistic expectations put on us. It can be tough, but in the end, you know, the days are long and the years are short, and they're getting shorter each and every year for me. So I hope you find the joy that I found in this career and the happiness, and that you have a successful career. This is all of my contact information, my email address, my cell phone number. If you're on social media, on all these platforms, you can find me at Darren J. Davis, GCS. Blogger, Facebook, they're all the same, Twitter, even TikTok, YouTube. They also can all be found on my website, which is also DarrenJDavisGCS.com. Again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you. I truly am humbled every time I'm asked. So thank you, Eric, for having me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I especially like that clip that you shared there, and hope I can get that from you because that's a good one. Couple questions as Bill starts to transition here, screen in. And for those of you guys out in the crowd there, you can use the chat function to ask any questions, Q&A, or raise your hand and I can unmute you. But I do have a question, you know, 2 questions really. One, did you have a mentor growing up, you know, through the industry, that especially early on, and maybe even people that you leaned on throughout your career as you were going through your 30 years there at Old Florida. I'm sure there were a lot of hard times with your travel expectations as a president of an organization as large as GCSAA. And then the second question is more specific to your role as a superintendent is, how did you find the best way to manage through some of the difficult engagements that you have with members or owners there on the golf course? Because you have so many people, everybody wants something different, and there's such a variety of personalities that are there at the club or at the golf course that you're, quote unquote, answering to. Have you found any skill sets or development opportunities out there to share with the crowd that helped you, or maybe something your mentor shared with you along the way that kind of helped you be successful?
Absolutely. So I will start with the second question. A lot of what has made me successful at Old Florida and allowed me to get to the challenging times, as you've said, because of course there are. If you look on social media, there's a lot of beautiful pictures of Old Florida. Is it always that way? No, come on, we all know that. There's always going to be challenges, whether it's weather or anything, and challenging with members. So honestly, Eric, a lot of the things I talked about is what has helped me get through that. I've learned that to be humble, I've learned to be visible, all the things I said. One of the compliments that I have received from a member, he's been a longtime member, and at the early annual meetings, the first 5 or 6 years, I got challenged by somebody, and the golf course at that point was perfect. I mean, as close to perfect as it could be. And there was a challenge in the season a month or so ago. We had a little bit of an issue with the fertilizer overlap, and he called me on the carpet in front of a group of members, in front of the board of directors, and it hurt, stung. And I can tell you that I did not handle that as a young 30-year-old, I'm going to say at the time, maybe 31. Didn't handle it the way I would handle it today. Smart enough not to say anything I shouldn't said, or in a bad way or in an angry way, but you could see the emotion on my face. And I've learned now to not take those things personally. And one member in particular came up to me, and he loves to tell the story. He goes, I remember that time when so-and-so did that, and you got pretty riled up. He goes, now I watch you at the annual meetings, and when someone says anything, or you just say, thank you, Mr. Jones, I appreciate your input. We'll certainly take that into consideration. I don't take it personally as much as I used to. I've had to learn that, find that balance, because I am passionate about what I do. It's not easy having criticism. It's not easy for me. It will never get any easier from here. I still have challenges at times when it happened this summer. When someone says, I don't like what you're doing here and there. You're ruining the golf course. We're cleaning up some underbrush. It's done. Fortunately, as the members have come back, everyone happens to love what I've done. So, it's over, but it never gets any easier. But try not to take it personal. Try not to take it home. Healthy mind, healthy body, stay balanced. So that's how I would answer the second question. Your first question on mentors, too many to list. It's a common answer, but I mean that sincerely. But I will list a few. Obviously, Dr. Duich. I recently came across a picture of Dr. Duich and I at Loxahatchee Club when we had some bent grass trials going on at Loxahatchee back before the A and G series were released. We were growing it at Loxahatchee under his request and his guidance. So came across that picture and I just smiled. I could tell another story, but I won't cut into Bill's time. But Frank Dobie is another one. Frank is a graduate of the Penn State program, I believe back in the 50s. Very early on anyway. But Frank Dobie, Tom Burrows, a number of GCSA past presidents, Pat Finland, Bob Rehnquist. I try to take my own advice, and I do seek advice from others, and I reach out to others and get input. So I had a number of wonderful people that have helped me through the way and will continue to do so.
Yeah, I appreciate those answers. The other last question before we transition to Bill, and certainly we'll have time at the end as well, but in today's day and age, with all the pressures on superintendents and hostile members, so to speak, at times, or opinions, that staying at a job for 30 years like you've done at Old Florida could not have come without some trials and tribulations, I'm sure. But it's just so uncommon in today's world to be at a job for 30 years. People seem to change jobs every 5 years and 10 years, and especially with the increased pressures that we have as superintendents. What did you find? How did you manage? I find it just mesmerizing that you've been at the same place for 30 years. Can you share with us some thoughts on what kept you at Old Florida for so long, and how did you remain through those trials and tribulations to be still so motivated and not want to really take other opportunities?
I can. Yeah, it's again, I could probably talk for an hour, a long time on this, but when I was interviewing at Old Florida, Kurt Keebler, and many people probably know Copland Keebler Wallace search firm. Kurt Keebler is a general manager at Loxahatchee Club. So it's prior to the search firm. And during a mock interview before I interviewed at Old Florida, he says, "Now, Darren, if you get this job, you have to stay 5 years. You need to show stability." He goes, "I know you're going to want to move on. You can be the superintendent at Augusta National or wherever, but show stability, stay 5 years." And I'm like, Mr. Keebler, I don't know if I can do that. So it's not easy, Eric. And I am still here 30 years later. And yes, I've had opportunities, and not boastful in any way, but I've had opportunities that would have literally doubled my salary. I mean that literally. And I just chose that decided it wasn't the right fit. And it's not always easy to say no, but the grass is not always greener on the other side. I know what I have here. I work for a great group of individuals that have confidence in me. They have trust in me. They've allowed me to do my job without too much interference. Over time, you build that relationship where they're almost like family. Mr. Cook is my club president for 29 of my 30 years here. Mr. Cook flew to San Diego as I finished my presidency. Mr. Cook and I just flew to Arizona last week to honor my counterpart, the PGA Golf Professional of the Year. But it was important that I be there as well as Mr. Cook. So that I talked about friendships and relationships on the job, and those are what have made me successful, is those relationships and feeling like family. And truthfully, Eric, if it hadn't been for all the involvement I have in the industry, I may not have stayed so long. I need something to fuel my passions beyond just the golf course. It's a full-time job, but being able to travel and work and serve the association, do the early training videos. You probably remember the SVW workshops, the Golf and Environment Video Magazine. I'm going really old school there, but all the involvement that I've been blessed to have in this industry is certainly part of why I've stayed as long as I have.
Awesome. Thank you. And there'll be some time at the end here for more questions. And I fear that we're about 20 minutes away from the scheduled end, but we can go longer if needed, if there's questions. Without further ado, Bill, I don't want to cut into any more of your time. Thank you. The stage is yours. And then we'll get back to questions and answers at the end.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to an awesome series. I just love the idea of this Learn Academy and what they are doing, and it is a privilege. And just like Darren, it's so humbling to participate in education. I really do love education. You'll find out shortly why, but it's an honor, and I really do appreciate being able to be with you today. I wanted to thank the Conley Corporation and the powers that be that asked us to do this. Certainly, as Darren alluded to, we do get asked to do these type of talks, and every time you'll meet a contact, you'll touch base with an old friend, or you will learn something. I mean, I learned something about Darren today, and I feel like I knew Darren pretty well. So it's a fantastic honor, and thank you so much for having me today. So for those of you who may not know me, I'm Bill Maynard. I was a golf course superintendent 35 years, certified 25 of those, and was the 81st president of the association. So that's a little bit about me. When I talked to Eric and Darren about what it takes to build a successful career in golf, I thought I would start with kind of where I came from and how I got into the business. My first assistant superintendent's job was where I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. And my dad was a real good friend of the electric golf cart technician. He was retired from Ford Motor, that's where he met my father. And so my father and this electric golf cart technician for the country club were buddies. They played cards together. He came over to the house a lot. And he knew that I liked to work outside. I would take Dad's lawnmower and would literally pull the walk mower behind me as I'm driving down the road and would mow yards for $10 back in the 80s. It's just what I did. So as they were meeting one afternoon, they said, Billy, what are you going to do during your college summers? Are you going to get a job? And so I said, yes, I would love to keep mowing and do this summer job. I thought I could get more yards, et cetera. Well, it turned into an opportunity for me to interview, to just be a staffer, to work on the golf course there at Hillwood in Nashville, right down the street from my house. And that's where I got inducted, if you will, into the joys of what golf course superintendents enjoy, the sunrises, the look what I did with my hands. We were able to do a lot of renovation at the time. We put in liners in bunkers, which I'd never seen before, put in a new irrigation system, built some tees, did cart paths, and it was an excellent opportunity. And during that time, I was going to college at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Big shout out to the Vols, hope they can get in the Final Four. And during that time, I learned that this is something I really, really enjoy. I would sneak into the office, sorry, Lewis, if you're listening, and read GCM magazine. At the time, it was called Golf Course Management. And I thought, what an interesting profession. And that really opened my eyes to how large the network is, how large the industry is, but yet how small it is too. We're such a great tight-knit fraternity. And in those opportunities to get some AC in his office, I would flip through and I said, well, what is this Golf Course Superintendents Association about? And that's where my first tickle of interest as to associations and what associations do came to be. After that, I was in the 90s now and finished my degree at University of Tennessee, which I got in psychology. And so I needed education in the agronomy world, which I'll talk about soon. But most of what Dr. Deutsch said was, you've got to learn how to interact with people and manage people as staff members. So I had a good fit there, and it turned out to be successful for my personality. And I didn't go back and get any further education, only through GCSAA and hands-on. So during the 90s, I built the Golf Club of Tennessee, which is right outside of Nashville. It was a fantastic Fazio project, and we got runner-up Best New Private that year. I'll never forget that. Then after doing that, I moved on to the next grow in Bristol, Virginia. Some of you on this call may know that location. It's a beautiful golf course, and was able to build that one in the early 90s. And of course, it was runner-up Best New Private. So I'm kind of like the Jim Kelly of the Super Bowls there. I never won the best, but the reason I bring that up is because it's a standard that really influenced my life as Darren mentioned earlier, the detail work, going beyond just growing grass. At the time, I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I did later in my career with staffing, like building culture. It was more block and tackle, new designs, part of the new 90s look. And it was just go, 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 working a lot of hours. My children were small. And so that was a real time of crucible, if you will, in my work life. After the Virginian Golf Club was over, I went to Tom Fazio's home course in Hendersonville, North Carolina. The most beautiful place I've ever lived in my life. My wife would go back there in a heartbeat. We just loved Asheville. We loved Hendersonville. It's a beautiful part of the state if you've been there. And that's where I got to work with Dr. Deutsch in a bentgrass renovation. We were doing our fairways from bluegrass to bentgrass and had him visit. And what a great mentor he was for me. I had the great fortune to go to dinner with him and Tom Fazio and my wife, and she still talks about that dinner. They talked about the industry, they talked about golf, and it was just an interesting time in my life. Loved Champion Hills. Then as the children got older and my wife's parents who lived in Kansas were aging and getting older, I took a job at Milburn Golf and Country Club in Overland Park, Kansas. This is where I was the longest. The boom of the 90s was over, and I was at the country club, or I was at Milburn for 14 years, and that's the longest I had been anywhere at the time. My previous stints were anywhere from 3 to 5. So this was a good time to raise children. Overland Park in Shawnee, Kansas is a great place to raise children in a very wholesome, awesome neighborhood. As a matter of fact, my grandchildren still live there. So thankful that they're there. So I wanted a challenge after 13 years. We have done everything we could to it. We built a new clubhouse. We built tees, cart paths, bunker renovation, greens regrassing. So it was time to move. And unlike Darren, you know, I wanted a new challenge. So I applied for a club in St. Louis called the Country Club of St. Albans. And it was a 36-hole facility for me. One course designed by Weiskopf, the other one with Hertz and Fry. And it was a real challenge for me to go from 18 holes to 36 holes. Yes, self-doubt did come in to play, but you just managed through it. I've learned so much later in life than I did earlier in my career about how to deal with stress. I'll talk about that too. So my current position is I'm the commercial sales and branch manager for MTI Distributing. MTI Distributing is one of 26 distributors of Toro equipment that is owned by Toro. We play varsity ball, and I'm very excited to have a second career staying close to the industry, but being involved in having sales for 2 states. So what it boils down to me, these tried and true 3 items that have really impacted my life, and I tried to boil it down to 3 things. First, as Darren mentioned, when he was at Penn State, learn the sound agronomic principles and practices. And then guess what? They're always changing. So continual learning. Darren said leaders learn, and it's still true. You must continue to evolve. You must continue to learn. You know, Darren went through the whole of seeing the A series come out of Penn State to what it is today. And those things change. We manage high density varieties much different than we managed Penncross back in the 90s. I had a BA degree in psychology, and it was always an interview topic as to why psychology and why not agronomy. Do you talk to the grass, Bill? Does the grass have feelings? It really is spun in the fact that half of the budget is payroll. And of the payroll, you really need to understand how to motivate individuals of different generations. Gen Y, Gen Z, baby boomers, you name it. You've got to have the ability to know what motivates your staff. So because I had a degree in psychology, I needed agronomic education. I sought out GCSA seminars. I was fortunate enough to go to the national back when we had the 3-ring binders. Darren, I know you remember that. And it was just a fantastic way for me to learn the block and tackle of agronomy. So you have to start with the sound practices there. And then lastly, being an instructor for GCSA has really taught me a lot. I work with co-presenters and I learn from them, and then I always learn from the audience. And what it did for me was give me a chance to practice public speaking, give me a chance to meet other people and increase my network. And I want to encourage any of you today that if you've got a great idea and you think others would learn from it, submit the idea to GCSA. They'll help you put things together. Okay, enough about a commercial there. This one's a big one, and Darren talked about it. The next one is networking with peers. When I was a young assistant, there weren't a lot of assistant meetings to go to like there are today. There certainly weren't any equipment technician meetings that like there are today. But I had to network with my employer, other superintendents that would come over. I would network a lot with the chemical reps that would come and visit, the equipment reps that would come and visit. And then as I got older in my career, I realized that I've got to build my network with some goals. So if you learn anything today from me, I want you to have some networking goals. Carol Rowell and I do a Power Hour presentation at GIS in Orlando this year called networking for introverts. And one of the main topics is having goals for your networking. I know Darren Davis will be, for an example, I know Darren Davis will be at the Everglades chapter meeting. I'm going to ask him about that phrase mowing and how he did that. That's a goal I would write on paper. 85% of the goals you write on paper, you will accomplish. So get some networking goals written down for your life, especially ahead of a chapter meeting or a national gathering, and just plain networking goals of what do you want out of your career and who can help you get there and who is already there that can mentor you through it. So those are some of the goals I encourage you to do. As Darren mentioned, you get so much out of national events, chapter events in your local chapter. Darren and I both were presidents of our local chapter before we ran for the board for the national chapters. And it just is amazing what you can learn just by listening and being in the room with so many people that are smarter than I was or am. And you just learn a ton that way by being in those meetings, by participating, by moving the needle forward, especially when it comes to an association like GCSAA or even your local association like the Heart of America in Kansas City and the Mississippi Valley here in St. Louis. Lastly, this is a big one that I learned later in my career, and it was through the help of the Kemper Sports Network. Create culture. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of studies out there. You could go and search to your heart's content, but be nice to people. You can't, as Darren mentioned, you have to have people help you, and they will help you. And the best analogy I can put for you today is you want people to follow you through the door. You don't want people to be told, there's the door. You want someone who's going to go to bat for you, who would die on a stake for you. And the way you do that is showing love, kindness, compassion, empathy, being genuinely interested, having fun events. I know Darren likes to do the food truck so every so often. We used to have golf course superintendent management games where you have to backpack blow a basketball through some different thing, who can coil the hose the fastest, stuff like that really does help build culture. Be sure you're doing training for your staff that may need it, and really take an interest in their life. Watch for imbalances in their work life and their personal life. You'll see them and they'll be very obvious, but pay attention to that and create culture and empower your leaders. Those are things that have really make a difference. It makes a great place to work when you have that. We had a quick story on Kemper Sports. They have the 5 pillars, and one of the pillars is always be kind and be pleasant and speak to the membership. As Darren mentioned, you always say Mr. and Mrs. I get that, but this kind of goes beyond that, because my staff said, Bill, if I'm on a fairway mower or if I'm mowing greens and they're trying to hit into me, how can I be friendly? And I said, you have to wave. So I told my staff every day seemed like all summer, keep up the waves, keep up the waves. Everybody just wave. And so for someone who had English as their second language, waving was easy. He didn't have to speak, she didn't have to speak, they could just wave. Fast forward a year to our annual meeting at St. Albans, and someone stood up and said, I'd just like to comment that Bill's staff is the friendliest staff ever. So it will come back to you when you set these goals and you create a culture. It'll come full circle back to you, and you'll be happy you did. So why, you might ask, Bill, after all that 35 years of successful golf course superintendent roles, did you switch? Well, I tell you, I was out of balance at my current job. I was under a lot of stress. It was all self-induced. You're worried about weather, you're worried about conditions. It's bent grass in St. Louis, need I say anymore? And I needed to change the stress in my life. My wife noticed it. She wanted her husband back. And so that's one of the things I did. So I had to switch jobs with that reducing stress in mind. The second thing is I was up against a ceiling with my current role. The assistant or the general manager said, look, Bill, you're up against me. There's nowhere else you can go. There were other properties in their Kemper network that I could help facilitate grass growing with, but it just meant more on my plate. And so I was up against my vertical ceiling there as far as career opportunities. And then lastly, the salary potential was limited. As a golf course superintendent at that particular budget at that club, I couldn't move any further. They could only do other things like vacations or things like that. So I was up against a salary cap. So what I wanted to do and what I wanted to challenge you today with is you're thinking about how you're preparing for your industry. Are you moldable? Can you reinvent yourself? Can you do things outside of the box? Let me just tell you, the role I'm in today is some similarities to being a golf course superintendent, but it all comes down to being creative and being disciplined. So those are two major things I want you to circle in your notes, is to be disciplined. And what I mean by that is stick to a schedule, stick to your plan, like Darren does his exercise on a regimented basis, whether it's learning, whether it's checklists at work, whatever that means, just be disciplined about it. So I had to reinvent myself. I had to learn a new business, businesses actually. There's several that are managed under my hat here. And I had to grow my skill set. I wanted a challenge. That's something that still burns in my belly, is to be inventive and be creative and learn new skill sets. And certainly this job has created that opportunity. Lastly, I wanted to stay close to the industry, and this was a great fit for me, is to be a sales manager for 2 states for MTI. And it's been great to stay close to the business. I know a lot of people from my previous involvement with GCSAA and chapters. So it was a great fit, and I'm really enjoying that part of my life. That's all I've got. I'll stop sharing and turn it over to you, Eric. Maybe you have some questions, or we can just recap.
Unmute myself. So that was awesome. Thank you. I can certainly relate in my current role and transition into sales. Some of those things you mentioned in your presentation there to end with, I can wholeheartedly support those. I feel the same thing. So from the crowd standpoint here on the call, and thank you guys again. It's awesome to hear from 2 industry pillars like yourselves. So for those in the crowd, you can use the raise hand function and I can unmute you if you have some questions that you'd like to ask yourself, or you can put them in the chat function. While we're waiting for any questions online, from the transitioning standpoint from a golf course superintendent into sales, what challenges have you found to be the biggest for you in this time period that you've been with your current employer?
Well, there are mainly 2, Eric. One is the incredible pressure communication has in my role. As a branch that's separate from our headquarters in Minneapolis, communication was key. So that transition part in communicating was a challenge. Some of it's based on the fact that I'm in Missouri and they're in Minnesota. Some of it was the fact that there's a lot to communicate in sales, and everything from deliveries to setups to pricing to packaging to, you can go on and on. The other challenge, besides the importance of communication, has been training and hiring new sales reps. I hired 2 new sales reps that worked in Iowa, and both came from the industry, and they were golf course superintendents. And so it was a real nice onboarding program that took a couple of months to go from, here's what you know as a superintendent, here's how you can impact your customer. It's everything from, hey, Eric, I just need a tee mower. Well, what are your heights of cut? Well, why does that matter? Well, because we have different types of numbers of blades, et cetera. So the fact that the new people we hired were superintendents really made a big difference when you're providing the customer with a service. One of the interesting challenges here is being a mentor for the sales team to learn how to be a consultative sales rep, a real help to the facility. And that's what really moves the needle. When you have I'll never forget, as a young superintendent, I was given a complete spray program at the Virginia. Here's, because as an assistant, you didn't write those programs, or at least I didn't. So that was my first superintendent's job, and here was a spray program. I'll always remember that that was such a help. So if we do that in the world of equipment and irrigation, we're going to be a step ahead and be a real consultative sales representative. So those are the immediate challenges, besides the fact that we've had unprecedented demand since the pandemic, and the global supply chain is causing problems with distribution. And I don't want to go into that, but that's the other problem that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I hear you. And everybody's tired of hearing about it too, right? So that's awesome. Any comments or questions from the crowd? We've got a few minutes. We can certainly ask those yourself or type them in the chat. Give it a few more minutes. I don't see any hands raised. And I'll double check the chat. Well, as we wrap up here, guys, I want to reiterate the appreciation that we have at WS Conley Companies for your time. The information that you shared with us today was awesome. You know, the one thing that kind of stands out to me, we've got people on the crowd, on the call today of all ages, and actually probably have some sports turf people on here as well. You know, this industry provides a great deal of opportunities, whether it's a golf course superintendent, assistant superintendent, a spray tech. You know, you've got the skill sets that you learn from working in this industry kind of transcend into other industries like you've done and I've done with sales. And what it comes down to for me has been really the people, right? And how this industry is willing to share with one another. We care about one another. And that's what keeps all of us in this business is those of us on this call and our friends in this industry. So I know that was true for me. I know it's true for you after hearing you, and I know that's true for Darren. So it's a great industry. I really appreciate everything about this thing and what GCSAA is doing to help promote the golf industry, but across the board when we talk about the sports turf managers and lawn care segments as well. You know, there's just a great deal of opportunity to keep us all connected. And I appreciate that a lot. So again, thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for your time. For those on the call, thank you for taking the time to listen. This is going to be available on demand. I would encourage you guys to write, you know, Bill and Darren, any questions you may have via email. We'll share that information as well. Again, on behalf of WS Conley, Landscape Supply, 10 Barge, Walker Supply, and all of our sales rep and sales team out there in the industry, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate this opportunity. Enjoy the rest of your week. Oh, one last question possibly. Oh, says thank you, John Cummings. You guys, familiar name there. Thank you, John. Says thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your week and stay safe.